To my dear wife, with whom I've shared 20 wonderful years of this beautiful life.
The crystal wine glass felt heavier than usual in my hand as I raised it toward the chandelier of the Millbrook Country Club's dining room. 20 years of marriage deserved a proper toast, even if my wife Sarah had been acting stranger than a cat in a thunderstorm all evening. To us, darling, I said, watching her pale blue eyes dart nervously around the room. To 20 years of wedded bliss. But something was wrong. Dead wrong. My name is David Mitchell, and I've spent the last 15 years as a Massachusetts state senator. You learn to read people in politics, their tells, their lies, their desperate attempts to hide the truth. Sarah's fingers were trembling as she lifted her glass, and that little muscle in her jaw was twitching like it did whenever she was planning something particularly nasty. The evening had started normally enough. I'd picked her up from her luxury day spa, Serenity Springs, where she'd been getting her hair and nails done for our anniversary dinner. She'd looked stunning in her black cocktail dress, the one that had cost more than most people's monthly salary. But there was something in her smile that reminded me of a shark circling wounded prey. You know, David, she said, setting her glass down without taking a sip, I've been thinking about our future a lot lately. Have you now? I kept my voice light, but my political instincts were screaming danger. 20 years of marriage had taught me that when Sarah started talking about our future, it usually meant trouble for me. The waiter appeared at our table, a young man named Tommy who'd been working at the club for about 6 months. He leaned down close to my ear, pretending to refill my water glass. Senator Mitchell, he whispered, his voice barely audible above the dinner conversation around us. I need to tell you something important. When you went to move your car from the valet area, I saw your wife. She crushed something into your wine glass, a white powder from a small envelope. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. The room suddenly felt like it was spinning, but I forced myself to remain calm. Years of political training had taught me never to show weakness, never to let them see you sweat. Thank you, Tommy, I whispered back, slipping him a $20 bill. Keep this between us for now. Sarah was checking her phone, typing rapidly with her perfectly manicured nails. I caught a glimpse of the name at the top of her text conversation. Derek Paulson. That name had been coming up a lot lately, supposedly a business consultant helping her expand the spa. A business consultant who was 35, drove a Porsche, and had the kind of smile that made married women forget their vows. Everything all right, sweetheart? I asked, reaching across the table to touch her hand. Her skin felt cold and clammy. Oh, just spa business, she said, quickly putting her phone away. You know how it is. Actually, I was starting to know exactly how it was. The late nights, the mysterious phone calls, the sudden interest in life insurance policies. Sarah thought she was being clever, but she'd forgotten that I'd built my political career on uncovering other people's secrets. I excused myself to use the restroom, walking slowly so I wouldn't arouse suspicion. Once inside, I called my longtime friend and lawyer, Rita Hawkins. Rita had been my law school roommate and had saved my political hide more times than I could count. Rita, I need you to listen carefully, I said, keeping my voice low. Sarah just tried to poison me at our anniversary dinner. Jesus Christ, David, are you sure? The waiter saw her put something in my wine. I haven't drunk it yet, but I need to know what my options are. Don't drink anything else she's touched. Can you get a sample of whatever she used? I'll try. What should I do about the wine? If you're absolutely certain she poisoned it, you could switch the glasses. But David, that's incredibly dangerous. What if she dies from her own poison? Rita, she just tried to murder me. I think the gloves are officially off. I hung up and returned to the table, my mind racing with possibilities. Sarah was reapplying her lipstick, using the little compact mirror she always carried. She looked beautiful, elegant, and absolutely deadly. Sorry about that, I said, sitting back down. Senator Williams wanted to discuss the education budget. On our anniversary? Sarah's voice had just the right amount of disappointed wife in it. If I hadn't known what she'd just tried to do, I might have actually felt guilty. You know how politics works, darling. No rest for the wicked. She laughed at that, a tinkling sound like breaking glass. No rest for the wicked indeed. The irony wasn't lost on me. I waited until she excused herself to powder her nose, then quickly switched our wine glasses. The crystal clinked softly as I made the exchange, and I noticed there was indeed a slight residue at the bottom of what had been my glass. Whatever she'd put in there, it hadn't completely dissolved. When Sarah returned, she was practically glowing with anticipation. She kept glancing at her watch and then at my wine glass, waiting for me to drink. "Shall we have that toast now?" I suggested, lifting what had originally been her glass. "Oh, yes," she breathed, her eyes bright with excitement. "Let's toast to new beginnings." "To new beginnings," I agreed, watching as she lifted the poisoned glass to her lips. "And to getting exactly what we deserve." We clinked glasses, and I took a small sip of the clean wine while Sarah drained nearly half of her glass in one go. She was probably nervous, wanting to get this over with quickly. "You know, Sarah, I've been thinking about our marriage lately too," I said conversationally, "about trust and loyalty and what happens when those things are broken." She nodded, but I could see she wasn't really listening. She was too focused on waiting for me to collapse, probably wondering why the poison was taking so long to work. "David, are you feeling all right?" she asked after a few minutes. "You look a little pale." "I feel fine, sweetheart. Never better, actually. How about you? You're looking a bit flushed." That's when I saw the first flicker of confusion cross her face. She touched her forehead with the back of her hand, and I could see a thin sheen of sweat beginning to form. I feel a little warm," she admitted. "Maybe I should—" She never finished the sentence. Sarah's eyes rolled back in her head, and she pitched forward onto the table, sending our dinner plates crashing to the floor. The sound of breaking china filled the dining room as other diners turned to stare. "Help!" I shouted, rushing to her side. "Someone call 911! My wife is having some kind of medical emergency!" The next 20 minutes were a blur of paramedics, flashing lights, and concerned club members offering their support. I rode in the ambulance with Sarah, holding her hand and playing the part of the devoted husband, while she drifted in and out of consciousness. What happened?" she whispered as the EMT inserted an IV into her arm. "You collapsed at dinner, darling," I said, stroking her hair. "But don't worry, the doctors are going to take excellent care of you." She squeezed my hand weakly, and for just a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. At the hospital, I sat in the waiting room while the doctors worked to stabilize her condition. Dr. Martinez, the attending physician, came out to speak with me after about an hour. "Senator Mitchell, your wife appears to have ingested some kind of toxin. We're running blood tests now to determine exactly what it was. Do you have any idea what she might have eaten or drunk that could have caused this?" "Nothing unusual," I lied smoothly. "We were having our anniversary dinner at the country club. She had the salmon, I had the steak. We shared a bottle of wine. We'll need to test everything from your table. This could be food poisoning, but her symptoms are more consistent with chemical poisoning." "Chemical poisoning? Good God, doctor, are you saying someone tried to poison my wife?" The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Dr. Martinez assured me they would get to the bottom of it, and I settled in for a long night at the hospital. While Sarah was unconscious in the ICU, I had time to think about what came next. She tried to murder me, probably for the life insurance money and to clear the way for her affair with Derek. But she'd failed, and now I held all the cards. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number. "Is she dead yet? I'm getting impatient." D. Derek Paulson, wondering if his lover had successfully murdered her husband. I screenshotted the message and forwarded it to Rita, along with a text of my own. Evidence #1, start building the case. Sarah woke up around 3 in the morning, groggy and confused. The doctors had pumped her stomach and given her activated charcoal to absorb whatever poison remained in her system. She was going to live, unfortunately for her. "David," she croaked, her voice hoarse from the tubes they'd had down her throat. "I'm here, sweetheart," I said, taking her hand. "You gave us quite a scare." "What happened to me?" "The doctors think you were poisoned. They're still running tests to figure out what kind of poison it was." I watched her face carefully as I said this, and I saw exactly what I was looking for. A flicker of fear, quickly hidden. She knew exactly what kind of poison it was because she'd chosen it herself. "Poisoned?" she whispered. "But how? Who would want to poison me?" "I don't know, darling. But I promise you, we're going to find out. And when we do, they're going to pay for what they did to you." The look in her eyes told me she was beginning to understand that her perfect plan had gone horribly wrong. But she had no idea just how wrong things were about to get. Sarah came home from the hospital 3 days later, weak but alive. The doctors had identified the poison as a concentrated dose of digitalis, derived from foxglove plants, enough to cause a heart attack that would look natural, especially in a man my age with the stress of political life. She'd done her homework, I had to give her credit for that, but while she'd been recovering in her hospital bed, I'd been busy doing homework of my own. Rita had worked her legal magic, obtaining copies of Sarah's recent financial records, phone logs, and internet search history. What we found painted a picture of a woman drowning in debt and desperate enough to commit murder. "David, you need to see this," Rita said, spreading the documents across my home office desk. "Your wife has been bleeding money for months. The spa is hemorrhaging cash, she's maxed out 6 credit cards, and she took out a second mortgage on the house without telling you." I studied the financial statements, feeling a cold fury building in my chest. How much are we talking about? $250,000 in debt, and that's just what I could find. There might be more. And the life insurance? She increased your policy to $2 million 6 months ago. Told the insurance company you were worried about your heart. The pieces were falling into place like dominoes. Sarah hadn't just been having an affair. She'd been planning my murder for months. The debt, the insurance, the poison, it was all premeditated. What about Derek Paulson? Rita pulled out another folder. Interesting guy. Real name is Derek Patterson, and he's got a record. Fraud, embezzlement, and one assault charge that was dropped when the victim mysteriously changed her story. He's been married twice, and both wives ended up financially ruined. So he's a professional con man. Looks that way. I think he targeted Sarah specifically because of your political position and wealth. The question is, was murder part of his original plan, or did Sarah come up with that herself? I leaned back in my chair, staring at the evidence spread before me. My wife of 20 years had tried to murder me for money and love, with the help of a career criminal who probably saw her as just another mark. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. What are my legal options? Attempted murder is a felony, but proving it will be tricky. She could claim she was poisoned too, that someone was targeting both of you. Without a confession or more direct evidence, a prosecutor might not want to take the case. Then we'll have to get more evidence. David, what are you planning? I looked at my old friend, this woman who'd helped me navigate the treacherous waters of politics for 15 years. I'm planning to give Sarah and Derek exactly what they deserve, but we're going to do it my way. That evening, I sat with Sarah in our living room, playing the part of the concerned husband. She was still pale and shaky, milking her victim status for all it was worth. "The police came by the hospital again today," she said, curled up on the couch with a cup of tea. "They're treating this as an attempted murder case." "Good. Whoever tried to hurt you needs to be caught." "David, I'm scared. What if they try again?" The performance was Oscar-worthy, but I could see right through it now. She was fishing for information, trying to figure out how much the police knew and whether they suspected her. "Don't worry, sweetheart. I've hired a private security firm to keep an eye on the house, and I'm having our phones monitored in case the butcher tries to contact us." That last part was a lie, but I wanted to see her reaction. Sure enough, her hand tightened on her teacup, and she glanced nervously at her phone on the coffee table. Is that really necessary? It seems like such an invasion of privacy. Privacy? I let a note of incredulity creep into my voice. "Sarah, someone tried to murder you. Privacy is the least of our concerns right now." She nodded reluctantly, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was probably wondering how she was going to communicate with Derek without being caught. My phone rang, and I glanced at the caller ID. "It's Detective Morrison from the state police. I should take this." I answered the call, putting it on speaker so Sarah could hear. Rita was on the other end, but Sarah didn't know that. "Senator Mitchell, this is Detective Morrison. We've made some progress on your wife's case." "What kind of progress, Detective?" "We've identified the type of poison used, and we're tracing where it might have been purchased. We're also looking into anyone who might have had access to your table that evening." Sarah's face went white, and she set down her teacup with shaking hands. "We'll need to interview both you and your wife again tomorrow. There are some inconsistencies in the timeline that we need to clear up." "Of course, Detective. We'll cooperate fully." After I hung up, Sarah was staring at me with wide, frightened eyes. What inconsistencies? What could be inconsistent about someone poisoning me? "I don't know, darling. Maybe they found evidence that suggests the poison was meant for me instead of you." She went even paler, if that was possible. "For you? But why would anyone want to hurt you?" "I'm a politician, Sarah. I've made plenty of enemies over the years. Maybe someone thought the best way to hurt me was to eliminate my wife." I paused, watching her face carefully. "Or maybe they were actually trying to eliminate me. And you drank from the wrong glass by mistake. The look of pure terror that crossed her face told me everything I needed to know. She was realizing that her perfect murder plot had not only failed, but had potentially exposed her as the would-be butcher. I need to lie down, she stammered, getting up from the couch. All this talk about murder is making me feel sick. Of course, sweetheart. You need your rest. As she headed upstairs, I noticed she took her phone with her. Within minutes, I could hear the faint sound of her voice through the ceiling, talking in urgent whispers to someone. Probably Derek, trying to figure out what to do next. I gave her an hour, then went upstairs to check on her. She was lying in bed staring at the ceiling, her phone nowhere in sight. Feeling any better? A little, David. I've been thinking about what the detective said. About the poison, maybe being meant for you. What about it? Well, if someone wanted to eliminate you, they might try again. Maybe I should go stay with Celeste for a while, just until the police catch whoever did this. Celeste Morrison, no relation to the fake detective, was Sarah's best friend and biggest enabler, a wealthy widow who spent her time gossiping and interfering in other people's marriages. If Sarah wanted to stay with Celeste, it was probably because she needed somewhere to plan her next move. That's not a bad idea, I said. You'll be safer there, and I won't have to worry about you while I'm dealing with the police investigation. She looked surprised that I'd agreed so easily. Really? You don't mind? Sarah, your safety is the most important thing to me. If staying with Celeste makes you feel safer, then that's what you should do. The next morning, I helped her pack a bag and drove her to Celeste's mansion in the hills overlooking town. Celeste met us at the door, a tall, elegant woman in her 50s with silver hair and cold blue eyes. David, I'm so sorry about what happened to Sarah, she said, embracing my wife protectively. It's just terrible that someone would try to hurt such a sweet, innocent woman. Yes, it's shocking, I agreed. I can't imagine who would want to harm Sarah. Celeste's eyes narrowed slightly, and I got the feeling she suspected more than she was letting on. Sarah had probably confided in her about the affair, if not the murder plot. Well, she'll be safe here, Celeste said. I have an excellent security system, and I'm always home. Thank you, Celeste. I really appreciate you looking after her. I kissed Sarah goodbye, playing the devoted husband one more time. Call me if you need anything, sweetheart. I love you. I love you too, she whispered, but the words sounded hollow. As I drove away from Celeste's house, I felt a grim satisfaction. Sarah thought she was escaping to safety, but she'd actually just walked into a trap. Now she and Derek would feel free to communicate openly, and I would be watching every move they made. The real game was just beginning. The first casualty of Sarah's poisoning attempt wasn't our marriage, it was our social circle. Word travels fast in a small town, especially when it involves a state senator and attempted murder. By the end of the week, I was discovering exactly who my real friends were. The answer was not many. I found this out the hard way at the Millbrook Country Club's monthly board meeting. I'd been a member of the board for 8 years, helping to make decisions about club policies and social events. But when I walked into the mahogany-paneled conference room that Thursday evening, the temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. David, said Robert Chen, the club president, barely looking up from his papers. Glad you could make it. The other board members, people I'd known for years, whose campaigns I'd supported, whose children had played with my daughter, suddenly found their meeting materials fascinating. Only Margaret Foster, the club's social director, met my eyes, and her expression was decidedly chilly. Before we begin, Robert continued, I think we need to address the elephant in the room. The incident at your anniversary dinner has created quite a stir among the membership. What kind of stir? I asked, though I had a pretty good idea where this was going. Well, Margaret spoke up, her voice dripping with false concern. There are questions about what really happened that night. Some members are wondering if the club might be liable for whatever occurred. Someone tried to poison my wife, Margaret. I hardly think the club is responsible for attempted murder. Yes, well, that's just it, said Thomas Brennan, the club's treasurer. The police investigation is ongoing, and there are rumors about the circumstances. I felt my jaw tighten. What kind of rumors, Tom? The uncomfortable silence stretched on for several seconds before Robert finally spoke. David, perhaps it would be best if you took a leave of absence from the board until this matter is resolved. A leave of absence. I repeated the words slowly, letting them hang in the air. Are you asking me to step down? Just temporarily, Margaret said quickly, until the investigation is complete and things settle down. I looked around the table at these people I'd considered friends. Robert, whose son I'd helped get into Harvard with a letter of recommendation. Margaret, whose husband's construction company had received several lucrative state contracts thanks to my influence. Tom, whose daughter's drunk driving arrest had mysteriously disappeared from the court records after I made a few phone calls. I see, I said finally. And this decision was made without consulting me? We discussed it informally, Robert admitted. The consensus was that it would be best for everyone involved. Best for everyone involved. I stood up slowly, straightening my tie. Well, gentlemen, lady, let me save you the trouble of a formal vote. I resign from the board, effective immediately. David, there's no need to be dramatic, Margaret said. We're just trying to protect the club's reputation. Protect the club's reputation, I repeated. From a man whose wife was nearly murdered. How considerate of you. I walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. You know, it's interesting. For 8 years, I've used my political connections to benefit this club and its members. I've smoothed over zoning issues, expedited permit applications, and made inconvenient legal problems disappear. But the moment I become inconvenient, you can't wait to throw me overboard. That's not fair, Tom protested. We appreciate everything you've done, but nothing, Tom. You've made your position clear. Just remember this conversation when your construction permits start getting held up in bureaucratic red tape. I left them sitting there in stunned silence and walked out to the club's bar, where I ordered a double whiskey and tried to process what had just happened. 20 minutes later, I was joined by Jack Morrison, a local real estate developer who'd been at the club that night. Rough meeting? He asked, settling onto the bar stool next to me. You could say that. For what it's worth, I think they're making a mistake. You've been good for this club. I studied Jack's face, looking for signs of insincerity. He seemed genuine, but then again, so had Robert and the others until tonight. Thanks, Jack. I appreciate that. Can I ask you something, off the record? Shoot. What really happened that night? With Sarah, I mean. I took a sip of my whiskey, considering how much to tell him. Someone put poison in her wine glass. She nearly died. Jesus. Any idea who? The police are investigating. Jack nodded slowly. You know, I was at the bar that night, waiting for my wife to finish in the ladies' room. I saw Sarah talking to some guy by the coat check. Young guy, good-looking, expensive suit. My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice casual. Did you recognize him? Never seen him before, but they seem pretty friendly, if you know what I mean. Lots of touching, whispering. At first I thought maybe it was a relative or something, but the body language was all wrong. What did he look like? Tall, dark hair, maybe mid-30s. Drove a red Porsche. I saw him getting into it when I was leaving. Derek Paulson. He'd been at the club that night, probably coordinating with Sarah about the poisoning, maybe even providing the poison itself. Did you tell the police about this? Jack shook his head. Nobody asked me. Should I? It might be important. If this guy was involved somehow, I'll give them a call tomorrow. We finished our drinks in comfortable silence, and I found myself genuinely grateful for Jack's support. It was nice to know that not everyone in town had written me off. But Jack turned out to be the exception, not the rule. Over the next few days, I discovered that the rumor mill had been working overtime, and the stories being spread about me were getting more creative by the hour. According to the Gossip Network, I had poisoned Sarah myself as part of an insurance scam. Or I was having an affair and wanted to get rid of my wife. Or Sarah had discovered some terrible secret about my political dealings and I'd tried to silence her permanently. The most popular theory, apparently, was that Sarah had found out about my corruption and was planning to expose me, so I'd tried to eliminate her to protect my career. I learned about this particular rumor from my longtime friend and political ally, Mike Patterson, who called me at home on Saturday morning. David, we need to talk, he said without preamble. Good morning to you too, Mike. This isn't a social call. I'm hearing things about you that are seriously concerning. Mike Patterson had been my closest friend in the state legislature for over a decade. We'd worked together on dozens of bills, supported each other through tough campaigns, and our families had vacationed together. If anyone should have been in my corner, it was Mike. What kind of things? People are saying you tried to eliminate Sarah because she found out about some kind of corruption scandal. They're saying she was going to turn you into the FBI. That's ridiculous, Mike. You know me better than that. Do I? Because I've got to tell you, David, some of the details I'm hearing are pretty specific. Bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, payoffs from construction companies, vote-buying schemes. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Not only were people spreading lies about me poisoning Sarah, but now they were accusing me of political corruption as well. Mike, none of that is true. You know I've never taken so much as a free lunch from a lobbyist. Then where are these stories coming from? That was an excellent question. Someone was working very hard to destroy my reputation, spreading detailed lies designed to make me look like a corrupt politician who'd tried to murder his wife to cover up his crimes. I don't know, but I intend to find out. David, I'm going to give you some advice as a friend. You need to hire a crisis management firm and get ahead of this story before it destroys your career. My career? Mike, someone tried to murder my wife. Don't you think that's a little more important than politics right now? Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like your wife might have had good reasons for wanting to expose you. The line went dead. Mike Patterson, my friend of 15 years, had just hung up on me. I sat there staring at the phone, trying to process what was happening. In the space of a week, I'd lost my position at the country club and one of my closest political allies. The rumor mill was painting me as a corrupt politician and potential murderer, and apparently people were believing it. But who was spreading these lies, and why were they so detailed and convincing? The answer came to me in a flash of insight that left me feeling sick to my stomach. There was only one person who knew enough about my political dealings to create convincing lies about corruption. Only one person who had access to my personal information and financial records. Sarah. While I'd been focused on her affair with Derek and the poisoning attempt, she'd been waging a different kind of war. She was systematically destroying my reputation, turning my friends against me and isolating me from my support network. The poisoning hadn't been Plan A, it had been Plan B. Plan A was to ruin me socially and politically, making me so radioactive that no one would want to associate with me. Then when I was completely isolated and vulnerable, she would finish me off. But she'd gotten impatient, or maybe Derek had pushed her to accelerate the timeline. So she'd tried the poison, and when that failed, she'd fallen back on the character assassination campaign. I had to admit, it was brilliant in its ruthlessness. Even if I could prove she'd tried to poison me, who would believe me now? I was already being painted as a desperate, corrupt politician who would say anything to save his career. My phone rang again. This time it was my chief of staff, Jennifer Walsh. "Senator, we have a problem," she said. "The Boston Globe is asking questions about your financial records. They want to know about alleged offshore accounts and construction company payoffs." "Jennifer, there are no offshore accounts or payoffs. Someone is spreading false information." "I believe you, Senator, but the reporter claims to have documentation, bank statements, canceled checks, email correspondence, forged documents. Sarah and her accomplices weren't just spreading rumors. They were creating fake evidence to support their lies." "Who's the reporter?" "Amanda Rodriguez from the investigative team. She's supposed to be very thorough." "Set up a meeting. I want to see these alleged documents myself." "Senator, are you sure that's wise? Maybe you should have your lawyer present." "Definitely have Rita there, but I want to face this head on. If someone is trying to frame me, I need to know exactly what they're using." After I hung up, I sat in my home office, surrounded by the legitimate documents Rita had gathered about Sarah's debts and Derek's criminal history. The irony was perfect. While I had real evidence of actual crimes, Sarah was using fake evidence of imaginary crimes to destroy me. But two could play that game. If Sarah wanted to wage war through rumor and innuendo, I was more than capable of fighting back. I'd spent 15 years in politics after all. I knew how to destroy someone's reputation when necessary. The question was, how far was I willing to go? The meeting with Amanda Rodriguez took place on a rainy Tuesday morning at Rita's law office downtown. Amanda was younger than I'd expected, probably in her early 30s, with short red hair and the kind of intense stare that made politicians nervous. She'd brought a thick folder and a digital recorder. "Senator Mitchell, thank you for agreeing to meet with me," she said, setting up her equipment on Rita's conference table. "I know this must be a difficult time for you." "It's been challenging," I admitted. "But I believe in transparency. If you have questions about my conduct in office, I'm happy to answer them." Amanda opened her folder and pulled out several documents. "Let's start with these bank statements. They show regular deposits to an account in the Cayman Islands, totaling over $400,000 in the past 3 years." I studied the papers she handed me. They looked official, proper letterhead, account numbers, transaction dates, but I'd never seen them before in my life. Miss Rodriguez, I've never had a bank account in the Cayman Islands or anywhere else outside the United States. These documents are forgeries. That's a serious accusation, Senator. Are you claiming that someone fabricated these bank statements to frame you? That's exactly what I'm claiming. Rita leaned forward. Amanda, can you tell us how you obtained these documents? They were provided by a confidential source who claims to have inside knowledge of Senator Mitchell's financial dealings. What kind of inside knowledge? I asked. And why won't this source go on the record? The source fears retaliation, but they've provided additional evidence to support their claims. Amanda pulled out more documents. Copies of checks allegedly written to me by construction companies. Email printouts supposedly showing me agreeing to vote certain ways in exchange for money. Even photos of me allegedly meeting with lobbyists in suspicious circumstances. It was masterfully done. The forger had clearly spent considerable time studying my actual financial records, my real email account, and my legitimate business meetings. They'd taken real elements and twisted them into something sinister. This is all fake, I said, pushing the documents back across the table. Every single piece of paper you've shown me is a forgery. Can you prove that? Can you prove they're real? Have you had these documents authenticated by forensic experts? Have you verified the bank account numbers with the actual banks? Amanda's confident expression flickered slightly. We're still in the process of verification. In other words, you haven't verified anything. You've been given a stack of fake documents by an anonymous source and you're treating them as gospel truth. Senator, I have to ask, is it possible that your wife discovered these financial irregularities and confronted you about them? Is that why she was poisoned? The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Amanda was suggesting that I'd tried to murder Sarah to cover up corruption that didn't exist, based on evidence that was fabricated. Miss Rodriguez, Rita interjected, that question is completely inappropriate. My client is the victim here. Someone tried to poison his wife. But there are questions about the circumstances of that poisoning. Some people are suggesting that Senator Mitchell might have been involved. I felt my temper rising, but I forced myself to stay calm. Getting angry would only make me look guilty. Who is some people? Are you talking about the same anonymous source who provided these fake documents? I'm talking about multiple sources who have raised concerns about your story. What concerns, specifically? Amanda consulted her notes. The timing of your wife's life insurance policy increase. The fact that you switched wine glasses that night. Your wife's recent discovery of what she believed to be evidence of your corruption. Every word was like a knife twist. Someone had fed Amanda a complete narrative that painted me as a corrupt politician who'd tried to murder his wife when she threatened to expose him. It was a compelling story, and it explained away any evidence of Sarah's actual guilt. Miss Rodriguez, let me be very clear about something. My wife tried to poison me that night, not the other way around. The waiter saw her put something in my wine glass. I switched the glasses to protect myself. Do you have any evidence to support that claim? I have the waiter's testimony. A waiter who works at a club where you're a prominent member and who might feel pressure to support your version of events. Rita placed a warning hand on my arm, sensing that I was about to lose my temper completely. I think we're done here, Rita said. Unless you have actual evidence of wrongdoing, not forged documents from anonymous sources, this conversation is over. Amanda packed up her materials, but I could see she wasn't satisfied. Senator, I want to give you every opportunity to tell your side of the story. If you're innocent of these charges, help me prove it. I don't have to prove my innocence, Miss Rodriguez. In this country, people are presumed innocent until proven guilty, and I haven't been proven guilty of anything. After Amanda left, I sat in Rita's office feeling like I'd just been run over by a truck. The fake evidence was so comprehensive, so detailed, that I could see how a reporter might find it convincing. They're good, Rita said, echoing my thoughts. Whoever put this together knows what they're doing. It has to be Sarah. She's the only one with enough inside information to create convincing forgeries. Maybe, but she'd need help. This level of document fabrication requires serious expertise. I thought about Derek Paulson and his criminal background. Fraud and embezzlement were his specialties. He'd probably forged documents before. What do we do now? We fight back, but we have to be smart about it. If we go after Sarah too aggressively, it'll look like you're trying to frame your wife to cover up your own crimes. So, what do you suggest? We start with Derek Paulson. He's the weak link in their operation. If we can prove he's been manipulating Sarah and forging documents, it undermines their entire narrative. That afternoon, I drove to Sarah's spa for the first time in months. Serenity Springs was located in a converted Victorian mansion on the outskirts of town, surrounded by manicured gardens and fountains. Sarah had spent a fortune renovating it, money I now knew she didn't have. The receptionist, a young woman named Ashley, looked surprised to see me. "Senator Mitchell? How is Mrs. Mitchell feeling?" "She's recovering, thank you. Is Derek Paulson here today?" I wanted to thank him for all his help with Sarah's business. Ashley's expression became guarded. "Mr. Paulson doesn't usually come in during business hours. He mostly works with Mrs. Mitchell on the financial side of things." "I see. Do you know how I might reach him?" I'm not sure I should give out his contact information without Mrs. Mitchell's permission." I smiled my most reassuring political smile. "Of course, I understand completely. I'll just call Sarah and get it from her." But as I turned to leave, Ashley called after me. "Senator Mitchell, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is it true that someone tried to hurt Mrs. Mitchell?" "I'm afraid so. The police are investigating." "That's so scary. She's such a sweet person. I can't imagine why anyone would want to hurt her." "Did you notice anything unusual lately? Anyone hanging around who shouldn't have been here?" Ashley glanced around nervously, then leaned closer. "Well, there was this one thing. Last week, before Mrs. Mitchell got sick, she and Mr. Paulson were in her office for hours. They had all these papers spread out, and they kept talking about insurance and what would happen if something happened to you." My pulse quickened. What exactly did they say? I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I was bringing them coffee, and I heard Mr. Paulson say something about making sure the policies were up to date because accidents happen. And Mrs. Mitchell laughed and said something about how you'd never see it coming. "Did you tell the police about this?" Ashley shook her head. "Nobody asked me, and I wasn't sure if it was important." "Ashley, it's very important. I think you should call the police and tell them exactly what you heard." "But what if I get in trouble? What if Mrs. Mitchell finds out I was listening?" "You won't get in trouble for telling the truth, and Mrs. Mitchell never has to know where the information came from." I left the spa with my first piece of concrete evidence linking Sarah and Derek to the poisoning plot. Ashley's testimony might not be enough to convict them, but it was a start. That evening, I called Jack Morrison, the real estate developer who'd seen Sarah with Derek at the country club. "Jack, this is David Mitchell. You mentioned you were going to call the police about seeing Sarah with that man at the club." "Oh, hi, David. Yeah, I called Detective Morrison. No relation, by the way. He said he'd follow up on it." "Did you remember anything else about their conversation?" "Actually, yeah. I was thinking about it after we talked, and I remembered something else. The guy handed Sarah something. Looked like a small envelope or packet. She put it in her purse real quick, like she didn't want anyone to see. The poison. Derek had given Sarah the Digitalist that night, probably right before dinner." "Jack, would you be willing to testify to that if necessary?" "Testify? You mean in court?" "Maybe, if it comes to that." There was a long pause. "David, I like you, and I think you're getting a raw deal. But testifying in a murder case? That's pretty serious stuff." "I understand. Just think about it, okay?" "I will. And David, I hope you get through this, okay? I really do." After I hung up, I sat in my study, planning my next moves. Sarah and Derek thought they were winning this war, but they'd made a crucial mistake. They'd gotten so focused on destroying my reputation that they'd forgotten to cover their own tracks. The spa employee who'd overheard them planning. The country club member who'd seen Derek give Sarah the poison. The forged documents that could be proven fake with proper forensic analysis. The text message Derek had sent asking if I was dead yet. I had the pieces of a case. Now I just needed to put them together in a way that would destroy my enemies before they could destroy me. The gloves were coming off. 2 weeks after the meeting with Amanda Rodriguez, I was ready to make my move. Rita had been working around the clock, building our case against Sarah and Derek while simultaneously defending me against the corruption allegations. We'd hired a forensic document expert who'd confirmed that the bank statements and other evidence were sophisticated forgeries. We'd also uncovered more details about Derek's criminal past, including a previous case where he'd murdered a wealthy woman by convincing her to change her will before poisoning her with digitalis. The pattern was becoming clear. Derek was a serial butcher who targeted wealthy women, usually with the help of forged documents and manufactured evidence. Sarah wasn't his first victim. She was his accomplice. But I still needed more evidence to prove it, and I needed to neutralize the threat they posed to my reputation and career. The opportunity came when Sarah called me, ostensibly to check on how I was handling the stress of the investigation. "David, I'm worried about you," she said, her voice full of fake concern. "All these terrible rumors about corruption and other things. It must be so hard." "It's been challenging," I admitted, "but I'm confident the truth will come out eventually." "Of course it will. You're a good man, David. Anyone who knows you would never believe these awful stories." The irony was breathtaking. Sarah was expressing sympathy for the very rumors she'd been spreading. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means a lot to me. How are you feeling? Any better?" "Much better. Celeste has been taking wonderful care of me, but I miss being home with you. Maybe you should come home soon. The house feels empty without you." "Really? You wouldn't mind?" "Of course not. You're my wife, Sarah. Despite everything that's happened, I still love you." The lie came easily. I'd been practicing it. "Oh, David, I love you too. So much." We arranged for her to come home the next evening. I spent the day preparing, with Rita's help and guidance from a private investigator she'd hired, a former FBI agent named Marcus Webb, who specialized in domestic surveillance. "The key is to get them talking," Marcus explained as he set up recording equipment throughout the house. "If you can get Sarah to admit her involvement in the poisoning or get Derek to incriminate himself, we'll have what we need. What if they don't take the bait? Then we go to plan B. But let's try this first." Sarah arrived home at 7 o'clock, carrying a small suitcase and looking genuinely nervous. I met her at the door with a bouquet of flowers and a warm embrace. "Welcome home, sweetheart." "It's good to be back," she said, but her eyes were darting around the room, probably looking for signs that something had changed. I'd prepared her favorite dinner, salmon with asparagus and a bottle of expensive white wine, the same wine we'd been drinking the night she tried to poison me. "This is lovely," she said as we sat down at the dining room table. "Just like our anniversary dinner. I thought it would be nice to recreate that evening, before all the unpleasantness." She picked up her wine glass, then hesitated. "David, you don't think, what if whoever poisoned me tries again?" "Don't worry, I had the wine tested before I opened it, and I watched the preparation of everything we're eating. We're perfectly safe." She relaxed slightly and took a sip of her wine. "You're so thoughtful. I don't deserve you." "Nonsense. We've been through a lot together, Sarah. A little poisoning incident isn't going to destroy 20 years of marriage." I kept the conversation light through dinner, talking about her recovery, her time at Celeste's house, and the ongoing police investigation. Sarah seemed to be relaxing, but I could tell she was still on guard. After dinner, we moved to the living room with our wine. This was where I planned to spring my trap. "Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." Her body tensed immediately. "What is it?" "The night you were poisoned, did you see anything unusual? Anyone who seemed out of place or suspicious?" I don't think so." "Why?" "Because the police think the poisoner might have been someone we know. Someone with access to our table." "Someone we know?" Her voice was getting higher. "But who would want to hurt us?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out. Think carefully, Sarah. Was there anyone at the club that night who seemed to be paying unusual attention to us?" She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her mind racing. Finally, she said, "Well, there was that man by the coat check." "What man?" "I don't know his name. Tall, dark hair, expensive suit. He seemed to know who we were." "Did you talk to him?" Another pause. "Just briefly. He said he recognized me from the spa." "What else did he say?" "Nothing really, just small talk." I leaned forward as if I was just putting pieces together. "Sarah, this is important. Did this man give you anything or ask you to do anything?" "Give me anything? Like what?" "I don't know. Maybe he asked you to deliver a message or hold something for him." I could see the panic starting to build in her eyes. She was realizing that I might know more than I was letting on. "David, why are you asking me these questions? Do you think I had something to do with what happened to me?" "Of course not, sweetheart. I'm just trying to help the police figure out what happened. But if this man gave you something or asked you to do something, it might be important." She stood up abruptly, nearly spilling her wine. "I think I need some air. This conversation is making me uncomfortable." Sarah, please sit down. We need to talk about this. Talk about what? You're acting like you think I'm involved in some kind of conspiracy. Aren't you? The words hung in the air between us like a loaded gun. Sarah's face went white and she sank back onto the couch. What did you just say? I said, aren't you involved in a conspiracy? Because that's what this looks like to me, Sarah. You and Derek Paulson conspired to poison me for the insurance money, but something went wrong and you ended up drinking the poison instead. That's insane. Derek Paulson? I barely know him. Really? Because Ashley at the spa says you and Derek spent hours in your office talking about my life insurance policies and how accidents happen. Sarah's composure was cracking. Ashley is lying. She's just a receptionist. She doesn't know anything. And Jack Morrison is lying too? He saw Derek give you something at the country club that night. A small envelope that you put in your purse. The same envelope that contained the digitalis you put in my wine. You're crazy. You're having some kind of breakdown. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshot of Derek's text message. Is Derek having a breakdown too? Because he sent me this text while you were in the hospital. Is she dead yet? I'm getting impatient. Sarah stared at the phone screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. How did you get that? He sent it to my phone by mistake. Probably meant to send it to you. David, I can explain. Explain what? How you've been having an affair with a career criminal? How you plan to murder me for the insurance money? How you've been spreading lies about me to destroy my reputation? Sarah started crying, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of rage and frustration. You don't understand, she sobbed. You have no idea what it's like being married to you. Always in your shadow, always playing second fiddle to your precious political career. I deserve better than this. So you decided to murder me? It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Derek said it would look like a heart attack, natural causes. Nobody would have suspected anything. There it was, the confession I needed. But something went wrong, didn't it? You drank from the wrong glass? You switched them. Somehow you knew and you switched them. The waiter saw you put the poison in my wine, Sarah. Did you really think nobody would notice? She wiped her eyes, and when she looked at me again, all pretense of love or remorse was gone. You smug fool, you think you're so smart, don't you? Smart enough to stay alive. Well, congratulations, David. You figured it all out. But what are you going to do about it? Who's going to believe you? Everyone in town thinks you're a corrupt politician who tried to eliminate his wife. Even if you have this conversation recorded, it'll just look like you coerced a confession out of me. She was right about one thing. I had been recording the conversation, but she was wrong about everything else. Actually, Sarah, quite a few people are going to believe me. Starting with Detective Morrison, who's been listening to this entire conversation from the van outside. Her face went white again. What? Did you really think I'd have this conversation without backup? The house is surrounded by police officers, and every word you've said has been transmitted to them in real time. As if on cue, we heard car doors slamming outside and heavy footsteps on the front porch. Sarah Mitchell, this is the police. Open the door. Sarah looked around frantically like a trapped animal looking for an escape route. But there was nowhere to run. The front door burst open, and Detective Morrison entered with 4 uniformed officers, their weapons drawn. Sarah Mitchell, you're under arrest for the attempted murder of David Mitchell and conspiracy to commit fraud. As they handcuffed her, Sarah looked at me with pure hatred. This isn't over, David. Derek will never let you get away with this. Actually, Detective Morrison said, Derek Paulson was arrested about an hour ago. He's already confessing and trying to make a deal. Apparently, you weren't his first victim. The look of betrayal that crossed Sarah's face was almost satisfying. Almost. They led her away in handcuffs, and I stood in my living room, surrounded by police officers and FBI agents, feeling strangely empty. 20 years of marriage ended with handcuffs and Miranda rights. But it wasn't over yet. There was still one more person who needed to pay for what had been done to me. Celeste Morrison's arrest came 3 days later, after Derek Paulson's confession revealed the full scope of their conspiracy. It turned out that Celeste hadn't just been Sarah's enabler, she'd been the mastermind behind the entire operation. The story Derek told the FBI was almost unbelievable in its audacity. Celeste had been planning my destruction for over 2 years, ever since I blocked a zoning variance that would have allowed her to build a shopping complex on environmentally protected land. She'd lost millions on the deal, and she'd never forgiven me. Her revenge was methodical and brilliant. First, she'd introduced Sarah to Derek at a charity function, knowing that Sarah was unhappy in our marriage and vulnerable to manipulation. Derek had seduced Sarah, convincing her that I was holding her back from her true potential. Then, Celeste had begun the slow process of isolating me from my friends and allies. She'd spread carefully crafted rumors about my political dealings, always stopping just short of making direct accusations. She'd planted seeds of doubt about my character, my integrity, my loyalty to my constituents. The corruption allegations had been her masterpiece. Using her connections in the media and her knowledge of my political activities, she'd created a comprehensive narrative of bribery and fraud. The forged documents had been Derek's contribution. He was apparently quite skilled at creating fake financial records. The plan had been to destroy me politically and socially first, then physically. Once I was isolated and vulnerable, Sarah would poison me, inherit my life insurance and estate, and disappear with Derek to start a new life somewhere far away. But they'd gotten impatient. Derek had pushed for the poisoning to happen sooner than planned, before they'd completely destroyed my reputation. And that impatience had been their downfall. I learned all of this from Detective Morrison as we sat in the FBI field office downtown, going over the details of the case. Derek had been surprisingly cooperative once he realized he was facing the death penalty for multiple murders across 3 states. "He's trying to pin everything on Celeste," Detective Morrison explained. "Claims she manipulated him and your wife, that he was just following orders. Do you believe him? Doesn't matter what I believe. The evidence shows they were all in it together. Your wife provided inside information about your finances and schedule. Derek handled the technical aspects, forging documents, obtaining the poison, planning the murder method. And Celeste orchestrated the whole thing. What kind of sentences are they looking at? Derek's probably going to get life without parole, maybe the death penalty if the prosecutor decides to seek it. Your wife and Celeste are looking at 25 to life for attempted murder and conspiracy." 25 to life? Sarah would be in her 70s before she had any chance of parole. It seemed like justice, but it felt hollow somehow. What about the corruption allegations, the forged documents? The FBI's forensic accountants have cleared you completely. The bank accounts were fake, the checks were forged, and the email correspondence was fabricated. We're preparing a full report that will exonerate you publicly. That was something, at least. My political career might survive this after all. But there was still one more piece of business to take care of. The confrontation with my former friends happened at the country club 3 weeks after Sarah's arrest. The board had called an emergency meeting to discuss my reinstatement, now that my innocence had been proven. I arrived to find the same people who'd thrown me overboard sitting around the same mahogany table, looking deeply uncomfortable. "David," Robert Chen said as I entered the room, "we owe you an apology." "Do you?" "We were wrong to ask for your resignation. We should have stood by you during this difficult time." I took my seat at the table, the same chair I'd occupied for 8 years before they'd betrayed me. "You should have, Robert, but you didn't." "We were trying to protect the club's reputation," Margaret Foster said defensively. "We had no way of knowing that the allegations were false." "Didn't you? Margaret, you've known me for 15 years. Did you really believe I was capable of political corruption and attempted murder?" She couldn't meet my eyes. The evidence seemed very convincing. The evidence was fabricated by people who wanted to destroy me, but instead of standing by a friend, you chose to believe the worst about me. "David, we're prepared to reinstate you to the board immediately," Tom Brennan said. "Full privileges, no questions asked." I looked around the table at these people who'd abandoned me when I needed them most. Robert, whose son was now a successful lawyer thanks to my help. Margaret, whose husband's construction company had profited from my political connections. Tom, whose daughter's criminal record had been expunged through my intervention. "That's very generous of you, Tom, but I'm afraid I'll have to decline." "Decline?" Robert looked confused. "But why?" "Because I've learned something valuable over the past few weeks. I've learned who my real friends are and who are just fair-weather allies. And unfortunately, none of you made the cut." I stood up and walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. "You know, when Sarah was poisoning me, she thought she was being clever. She thought she could destroy me and get away with it because I trusted her. But the real betrayal wasn't from my wife. It was from people like you. People I considered friends who were so quick to believe the worst about me. David, please, Margaret said. We made a mistake. Can't we move past this? Move past it? Margaret, you didn't just make a mistake. You made a choice. When the chips were down, you chose to protect yourselves instead of standing by a friend. That's not a mistake. That's a character flaw. I opened the door and looked back at them one more time. Oh, and Robert? You might want to start looking for a new legal counsel for the club, because after what you people did to me, I wouldn't represent this organization for all the money in the world. I walked out of the country club for the last time, leaving them sitting there in stunned silence. The final confrontation came a month later at Sarah's sentencing hearing. I sat in the courtroom gallery, watching as my wife of 20 years stood before the judge in an orange jumpsuit and shackles. She'd tried to make a deal with the prosecutors, claiming that she'd been manipulated by Derek and Celeste, that she'd been a victim too. But the evidence was overwhelming. The recorded confession, the testimony from the spa employee, the text messages between her and Derek, it all painted a picture of a woman who'd willingly participated in a murder plot. Mrs. Mitchell, Judge Harrison said, you have been found guilty of attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, and fraud. Before I impose sentence, do you have anything to say? Sarah stood up slowly, and for a moment I thought she might finally show some remorse. Instead, she turned and looked directly at me. I want my husband to know that I regret nothing, she said, her voice clear and strong. He destroyed my dreams, my ambitions, my chance at happiness. Everything I did because he deserved it. Even now, facing decades in prison, she was blaming me for her choices. Judge Harrison was not impressed. Mrs. Mitchell, your complete lack of remorse is noted. I hereby sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years. In addition, you are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $500,000 for the emotional distress and reputational damage caused to the victim. Life in prison. Sarah would be 70 years old before she had any chance of freedom. As they led her away, she looked at me one more time. But instead of hatred or anger, I saw something else in her eyes. Fear. She was finally realizing that her actions had consequences, that her carefully laid plans had backfired spectacularly. Derek Paulson received the death penalty. Celeste Morrison got life without parole. The three conspirators who tried to destroy me were going to spend the rest of their lives behind bars. But my victory felt hollow. Yes, I'd survived their assassination attempt. Yes, I'd cleared my name and salvaged my political career. But I'd also lost my wife, my marriage, and most of my social circle. The cost of survival had been higher than I'd expected. 6 months after the trial, I was back at the state capitol, working on legislation and rebuilding my reputation. The corruption allegations had been thoroughly debunked, and most of my political allies had returned to the fold. But I was a different man than I'd been before Sarah's betrayal. I was harder, more cynical, less trusting. I'd learned that the people closest to you could be the most dangerous enemies. I'd learned that loyalty was a rare commodity, and that most people would abandon you the moment it became convenient. But I'd also learned that I was stronger than I'd thought. I'd survived attempted murder, character assassination, and social ostracism. I'd fought back against impossible odds and won. As I sat in my office that evening, looking out at the city lights, I reflected on the events of the past year. Sarah had tried to poison me at our anniversary dinner, thinking she could murder me and steal my life. Instead, she'd ended up destroying herself. The irony was perfect. In trying to eliminate me, she'd committed suicide. Social, financial, and literal. She was dead to the world now, buried alive in a prison cell, while I was free to rebuild my life. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jack Morrison, the real estate developer who'd stood by me when everyone else had turned away. Dinner tomorrow night? My treat. Want to celebrate your vindication properly? I smiled and typed back. Sounds perfect. It's good to know who your real friends are. And it was. After everything I'd been through, I finally knew who I could trust and who I couldn't. The knowledge had cost me dearly, but it was worth it. I raised my coffee cup in a silent toast to my reflection in the office window. To new beginnings, I said aloud, and to getting exactly what we deserve. Sarah had gotten exactly what she deserved, and so had I.